For starters, my initial topic was old versus new cartoons. This topic was revolved more around like colors and how it can affect younger children. And I wanted to compare how old cartoon colors and new cartoon colors would affect children. And through this, I did get rejected by the ethics board because I did not give enough like necessary background information for this topic. But I still knew I wanted to do something in the cartoon range because this is something that I grew up with and I really enjoyed. So I kept researching into cartoons, and I found that with rebooted cartoons and original cartoons, there is like a huge gap in research where there's like basically no articles on it. And the only thing I could find about rebooted cartoons and original cartoons and their comparisons and differences were on like Reddit threads and YouTube videos. Here on the screen are just some of the things I found where Redditors were talking about how they don't like certain reboots, and they're talking about like why they dislike it. A lot of these reviews were also on Google reviews when I searched up these specific shows that they were talking about, and a lot of these reviews have things in common, which were that the characters themselves were changed, like the original cartoon character and the rebooted one, their personalities changed in those. And sometimes even like the story would change as well. So when looking at the higher ratings for these rebooted cartoons, I also found out that a lot of these reviews were most likely made by adults because they were talking about their children and how their children enjoyed those shows. And again, the lower ratings were mainly just characters and the story, as well as like some brief mentions of childhood and how the original show can compare to the rebooted one, because the rebooted show was not how they remembered. So this led me to my question: are the hate comments under rebooted cartoons justified? Are these hate comments actually correct when they talk about how the characters have changed or how the story has changed? So with this, I developed my methodology where I would gather reviews. I would then watch both the rebooted shows and the original shows, and then compare both the shows together to make my conclusion on whether or not these were justified. These hate comments were justified. The shows I chose were Ben 10, Teen Titans, and Powerpuff Girls. I chose these shows mainly because not only were they the ones that showed up a lot when I was researching this topic about the most like hated reboot shows, but also because they were all streamed on Cartoon Network and they came out around the same year, which was 2016. I also, only to add on to like why I chose these shows too, is because I mainly watched like 2 seasons of both of them because of time, mainly. So to start off with Ben 10, the original show has a regular story progression, so it was just them following the main story with some like mini villains in between. And the Ben 10 reboot was mainly just, it relied more on the person watching to know what the original Ben 10 was about, because there was really no episode in the beginning that said anything about how Ben got the Omnitrix, and it was just like Ben just being an expert with the Omnitrix, unlike the original, which talked about how Ben slowly got accustomed to the Omnitrix. So basically the rebooted rebooted cartoon, it was just Ben being an expert with it. In the reboot as well, I noticed that Gwen had some differences between the original and the reboot. In the original, she was a bit more childish because she wanted to she would be one-upping Ben most of the time. And whenever she would cause an argument with him, or he would cause an argument with her. However, in the reboot, she gets along a lot better with Ben, and they act a lot more like siblings. They still bicker, but not as much as in the original. For Grandpa Max, he was also a bit different. They just made him a lot more goofier in this one, as opposed to the original, which was a lot more serious. The reason why I chose these two characters instead of the main character Ben is because Ben got the most screen time in this reboot, and because he got the most screen time, these two characters were barely on the screen, and they're the ones that I noticed more of the differences, because it felt like they weren't really shown much. Ben also didn't go through any differences. He was still having a hero complex. He would act selfish sometimes, and he was still mischievous. Now looking at Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go, Teen Titans is a lot more serious when it comes to the storytelling, but Teen Titans Go is more of a gag show, so it was mainly more there for just laughs. When looking at the Teen Titans main cast, I noticed that they were actually around the same as in Teen Titans Go, except in Teen Titans Go, they mainly just looked at one attribute, and they sort of they brought out more of that. So, yeah. However, Robin went through the most character change, because in the original, he was a lot more strategical, and he was a lot more of a leader to them. However, in the reboot, he's a lot more arrogant, and he's more obnoxious in a sense. For example, in the original season 1, episode 11, when Robin works for Slade because he doesn't want the Titans to die, as they had probes in them that Slade could detonate at any moment, killing them all. So Robin shows more of a protectiveness for them. However, as opposed to the reboot, Robin, he was a lot more arrogant in a way, especially with Starfire in the reboot season 1, episode 6. Robin kidnaps Kid Flash because he wanted to go on a date with Starfire. However, Starfire finds out after Robin confesses about it in guilt, and she punches him. Moving on to the Powerpuff Girls. Compared to the original, the reboot had more of a focus on the girls than the villains. An example of this would be season 1, episode 7, where they focus more on the villains in that episode, because in that episode the Gangrene Gang is making prank calls to the Powerpuff Girls, and they're making a lot of prank calls, and they prank call the villains too. And all the villains at the end, they just go to the Gangrene Gang, and then they beat them up. There was also not that much action in most of the episodes, and there was also changes made to the story, which include a new character, Bliss, and some more story changes with Professor Utopia. For this, mainly for the character analysis, I didn't find any changes in Bubbles, so I'll just be looking at Buttercup and Blossom. To start off with Blossom, she is a lot more strategical and is more of a leader in the original than compared to the rebooted version, where she's just reduced to a nerdy character who just wants wants to get straight A's in all her classes. The Blossom in the original cartoon is also more arrogant, as shown in season 1, episode 3, when Bubbles wants Blossom and Buttercup to stop fighting over who should be the leader. Blossom automatically assumes that she is a leader because she seems way better than Buttercup. And some similarities are both of them are very intelligent. In the original, Buttercup is a lot more giggly. She's a lot more innocent as a character, but she can also conform a lot easier to other people's opinions. In season 1, episode 15, Buttercup joins in with a bunch of kids who are making fun of another kid who eats glue, and she sees everyone picking on him and laughing, so she herself thinks that it's a good thing to do. So she ends up hitting him with a glue bottle and throwing glue all over him. At the end, however, she realizes the wrongs of her actions and she apologizes to him. However, in the reboot, she's more of a musclehead, meaning that she's a character that just uses who doesn't use her brain. And she was a lot meaner to the background characters and the main cast as well. In the reboot, season 1, episode 6, she has anger issues in that episode, and she ends up punching Bubbles and giving Bubbles a black eye, and this is out of character for her, especially because in the original she's a lot more sweeter to her sisters, and this is shown in season 1, episode 4, where Buttercup falls in love with the Gangrene Gang's leader, and she notices them like using her to get rid of her sisters, and when she notices that, she immediately jumps in to save them. So I found that extremely out of character for her. When it comes to Bliss and the Professor, Bliss is a new character that was added in. However, her backstory just doesn't really make any sense when it comes to the Professor's character. In the original series, the Professor is very protective with the girls. In season 1, episode 13, Professor Utonium, he notices the girls saving the day while they're at the beach. However, he realizes how much danger that they're being put in, so he develops a robot to encase the girls in. And with that robot, the robot ends up destroying all of Townsville, but he still thinks that he did a good job because the girls were safe in the end. However, in the rebooted version, when Bliss is first introduced as a character, Professor Utonium describes him as making her as the first Powerpuff Girl because he got jealous of another professor who made the perfect little boy. In season 2, episode 30, the professor is described to be having to abandon Bliss, and it doesn't line up with his character because he is someone who's protective over the girls, so why wouldn't he be protective over Bliss? Some limitations that I had while analyzing the characters was that I wasn't able to analyze the whole series because I only watched 2 seasons of both the original and rebooted show. And I also did not research about what makes a good reboot because I was only looking at the bad reboots. I wasn't looking at any good reboots. To conclude, I think that the hate comments can be justified, especially because a lot of the hate comments were about the changes in story and the characters, and it is shown throughout throughout these reboots that there were changes to the story and the characters, and
Okay. Imagine someone were performing a similar research. Which database or source for evidence would you recommend they use and why?
If someone were to do a similar research to mine, I would recommend using threads like Quora or Reddit for like more people's opinions on these reboot shows.
Okay.
So based on your research, do you think there's ever a way for reboot to actually be better than the original? And if so, what would it take for audience to accept it?
I think that there is a chance for a reboot to be better than the original because, especially if people take into account what other people have said about these other rebooted shows, I think that they can create a really good reboot show that's better than the original that might even like outshine it too. Maybe they could take into account like not changing the character or sometimes even like the original like canon storyline.
Which of your sources was the most influential, and in what way is that influence apparent in your final conclusion?
The most influential source was like it was mainly like the Google reviews and like the Reddit comments and those threads. They really helped me out when trying to figure out like people's opinions on these reboot shows.
Okay. Thank you. Does anybody have any additional questions?